The wind off the river had teeth that night. November in Detroit had a way of doing that, of biting through whatever a person was wearing and getting straight to the bone. The little girl walking down Cass Avenue did not have much. A thin cotton dress the color of dishwater. A pair of socks that had once been white and were now the color of the sidewalk. No coat, no shoes. In her left hand, she carried a folded photograph that had been folded and unfolded so many times the creases had become small white lines, and in her right hand she carried a slip of paper with an address written on it in pencil. The handwriting on the paper was not hers. It belonged to a woman she did not remember, but knew the way some children know things, the way you know the smell of a place you have never been but were told about once when you were too young to remember being told. Her name was Lily Bennett. She was 8 years old. She had been walking for 3 days. She stopped at the corner of Cass and Selden and looked up at the brick building across the street. There were no windows on the front, only a single steel door with a small painted symbol above it, a kind of cross with wings. There were motorcycles parked along the curb, 6 of them lined up in a careful row. There was a faint sound coming from inside, low voices, men's voices, and underneath that, the sound of a refrigerator humming. Lily checked the slip of paper again. She checked it carefully the way she had learned to check things. Then she crossed the street. She did not go to the door. She did not know how to knock on a door like that. Instead, she walked around the side of the building where the brick was older and the air smelled like cigarette smoke that had been there a long time, and she sat down against the wall. There was a piece of cardboard near a dumpster. She pulled it loose and dragged it over and arranged it against her legs, the way she had seen another homeless woman do once at a bus station outside Toledo. The cardboard helped. Not much, but a little. She tucked the photograph inside her dress against her chest, where the warmth of her own body might keep it from getting damp. She kept the slip of paper in her fist. Then she waited. She did not cry. She had stopped crying about a year ago, somewhere between the 3rd foster home and the 4th. Crying did not change anything. Crying made the women in the houses look at her with a particular kind of tired that always seemed to end with her bags being packed again. So she stopped. Inside the building, a meeting was ending. Hank Morrow had been president of the Iron Saints Detroit chapter for 11 years. He was 58 years old. He was not the largest man in any room he entered, but he was almost always the stillest. When his men raised their voices, Hank got quieter. When something was going wrong, Hank slowed down. His members had learned that the slower he got, the more serious the situation was, and they had also learned over many years that Hank's stillness was not the stillness of a man who was unsure. It was the stillness of a man who had already decided. The meeting that night had been a long one. There had been arguments about a charity ride scheduled for the spring, and about a member named Caleb who had been drinking again, and about a piece of property out in Hamtramck the club had been thinking about buying. Hank had listened to all of it. He had said very little. When it was over, he stood up, told everyone he needed some air, and walked out the back door alone. He did not light a cigarette. He had quit 4 years ago. He just stood there in the alley behind the clubhouse with his hands in the pockets of his jacket and watched his breath turn white in the cold. He almost went back inside without seeing her. It was the cardboard that caught his eye. There was always trash in the alley that was nothing new, but the cardboard had been pulled away from the dumpster and arranged in a way that looked deliberate. Hank walked over slowly. He came around the side of the building. He stopped, 8 years old maybe, curled against the wall. The cardboard pulled up to her chest. No coat, no shoes. a thin dress. Her eyes were open, and when she turned her head and saw him, she did not flinch. She did not scramble back. She did not do any of the things a child should do when a large man in a leather jacket appears out of the dark. She just looked at him. That was the part that stayed with him later. She looked at him the way a child looks at a stranger she has decided to give one chance, not afraid, not trusting either, watching with an attention that did not belong on a face that small. Hank crouched down. He kept some distance. He did not reach for her. "Hey," he said. She did not answer. "You alone?" She nodded once. "You been out here long?" "Since this afternoon," she said. Her voice was hoarse. She had not used it in a while. Hank looked at her hands. There was a piece of paper in one of them. There was something tucked inside the front of her dress, something rectangular. He could see the edge of it where the fabric pulled. "You hungry?" he asked. She thought about that. She actually thought about it. Then she nodded. "There's food inside," he said. "It's warm. You can come in if you want. I'm not going to make you." She looked at the door. She looked back at him. She looked at the slip of paper in her hand. Then she stood up very carefully and walked toward him. Hank stood up too. He did not offer his hand. He just turned and walked toward the back door, and she followed him 3 steps behind the cardboard left where it was. Inside the clubhouse was warm. The main room had a long table in the center and a small kitchen along one wall and a sitting area near the back with 2 old couches. The walls were brick painted white a long time ago. There were photographs and patches and a few framed newspaper clippings, and along the far wall near the kitchen there was a section that everyone in the club knew not to touch, a memorial wall. 9 photographs in plain wooden frames, some old, some not so old. People the club had lost, people the club had failed. Hank had put each of them there himself. The men at the table looked up when Hank came back in. 5 of them. Grip Saunders, who had been Hank's road captain for 9 years and looked like a man carved out of a fence post. Polly Voss, smaller, quicker, the one who handled the books. Carver Reed, the youngest at the table 31, who had earned his patch the hard way. Eddie Holloway, who everyone called Wrench, 63, the oldest member of the chapter and the closest thing Hank had to a brother. And Torres, who did not talk much and who could build anything out of anything. They saw the girl behind Hank. Nobody said a word. Hank pulled out a chair at the table and gestured to it. The little girl climbed up. The chair was too tall for her. Her feet dangled. Hank walked to the small kitchen and opened the refrigerator. There was a pot of chili from earlier in the evening. He warmed a bowl in the microwave. He cut 2 pieces of bread. He brought it all back and set it down in front of her with a spoon. She did not eat right away. She looked at the food. She looked at him. Then she picked up the spoon and started to eat, and she ate the way Hank had seen people eat in other places, and other times the way people eat when they are not sure the food will still be there in 5 minutes. The men at the table did not speak. They had been around Hank long enough to know what his silences meant, and his silence right then meant that whatever was happening, it was real, and they should let it happen. Hank pulled up a chair across from her, not behind the table across from her at her level. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily," she said around a piece of bread. "Lily what?" "Lily Bennett." Hank did not react, but somewhere inside him, in a place he had built carefully over many years to keep certain things stored away from his daily life, something turned over. "You have a family, Lily." She shook her head. She kept eating. "Where have you been staying?" She put the spoon down. She thought about how to answer. Children think about how to answer in a way adults stop doing somewhere around the age of 15. "Lots of places," she said. "Last one was a lady named Mrs. Pollock in Toledo, but she got sent to a hospital, and the people who came to the house said I had to go somewhere else, and I did not want to go somewhere else. So you left." Yes. How did you get to Detroit? A bus, mostly, and then walking. By yourself. She nodded. Hank let that sit. He did not press. He glanced at his men. Wrench was looking at her with an expression Hank knew the expression of a man whose own grandkids lived 2 states away and who had not seen them in 11 months. Paulie was already on his phone doing something quietly. Grip was just watching the way Grip watched everything. How did you find this place, Lily? Hank asked. She reached down and unfolded her fingers. The slip of paper was damp from her hand. She set it on the table between them. Hank picked it up. There was an address written on it in pencil in handwriting that was old, faded, careful. The address of the clubhouse. And below the address, one word. Morrow. Hank looked at it for a long time. The room was silent. The refrigerator hummed. Where did you get this, Lily? It was in my mom's things, she said. There's a box. I take it with me. It's small. The man at the bus station took it from me, but I got it back. Your mom gave it to you. She wrote it for me before she died. How old were you when she died? A baby. How old are you now? 8. Hank set the paper down very carefully, as if it might tear if he was not careful. He looked at the girl across from him. He looked at her eyes. He had been trying not to look at her eyes since he had crouched down in the alley. They were dark and very steady, and they were not the eyes of a child he was meeting for the first time. He had seen those eyes before. He had seen them in a photograph that hung on a wall on the other side of the room. He stood up. He walked very slowly across the room, past the table, past his men, who were watching him now with something like alarm because they had never seen Hank Morrow move quite the way he was moving right then. He walked to the memorial wall. He stopped in front of the photograph at the far left. A young woman, maybe 26, dark hair pulled back, a serious mouth, and those eyes. Behind him at the table, Lily had set down her spoon. She had turned in her chair. She was looking at the wall, too. That's my mommy, she said. Her voice was small but completely clear. Why is her picture here? Hank closed his eyes. For one moment, just one, he was not in the clubhouse on Cass Avenue. He was somewhere in February of 2017, and a young woman was sitting at the same table, and she was saying, please, and she was saying, I have nowhere else to go, and the chapter had voted, and he had cast the deciding vote, and the deciding vote had been no. He opened his eyes. He turned around. The little girl was watching him. The men were watching him. Nobody moved. Lily, he said, I need you to keep eating. Can you do that for me? She nodded slowly. She turned back to her bowl. She picked up the spoon. Hank walked over to the cabinet behind the bar. He unlocked the bottom drawer and took out a small notebook with a black cover. There was nothing written on the outside. He had carried it with him for 15 years. He sat down at the end of the table away from Lily and he opened it. The first page had a name written on it, Clara Bennett. Below her name in his own handwriting from many years ago, a date, February 11th, 2017. And below that, 3 words. We said no. He turned the page. The second name. The third. There were 19 names in the book. Some of them had photographs on the wall. Some of them did not. All of them were people who had come to the Iron Saints in the worst hour of their lives, and the Iron Saints had decided not to step in. Hank closed the book. He looked across the room at the little girl eating chili at his table. He looked at the photograph of her mother on the wall. He thought about the night of the vote. He thought about how clean the decision had felt. Not our problem. Too complicated. Too much risk. He thought about Clara Bennett standing up from this table and walking out into the cold. He thought about how she had paused at the door just for a second and looked back and then kept going. 3 days later, she had been killed in her apartment. Shot twice. She had been pregnant once and given birth in a hospital and gone home with a daughter. The daughter had been 6 months old when Clara died. Hank had read about it in the paper. He had cut out the article and put it in the back of the black notebook and closed the cover and not opened the book again for many years. He had not known what had happened to the baby. Apparently, he was about to find out. He picked up his phone. He stepped into the back hallway. He called a number he had not dialed in 18 months. Diane Whitaker had worked at the City of Detroit Department of Health and Human Services for 26 years. She was 60 years old, 4 years away from retirement, and she owed Hank Morrow a particular favor from a particular night in 2013 that neither of them had ever talked about with anyone else. She picked up on the second ring. "Hank, Diane, I need a quiet favor." "All right." "Clara Bennett, killed in 2017. She had a daughter 6 months old at the time of death. I need to know what happened to that child." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Hank," Diane said, "where are you right now?" "At the clubhouse." "Is the child with you?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." Another pause longer this time. "Don't move," Diane said. "Don't call anyone else. Don't talk to anyone outside that building. Give me 45 minutes. "Diane, what is going on?" 45 minutes, Hank, please." She hung up. Hank stood in the hallway for a moment. Then he walked back into the main room. Lily had finished her chili. She had pushed the bowl gently away from her the way someone might do at a restaurant when they were satisfied. She was looking at the wall again, at all the photographs, studying each face in turn. She was working her way down the line. Hank sat back down at the table and watched her do it. She was patient. She was thorough. She looked at each photograph for almost a minute before moving on to the next. She studied them the way an adult studies a painting in a museum. When she got to the last one, she turned and looked at Hank. "They're all dead, aren't they?" she said. Hank nodded. "All of them." "Yes." "Did they all come here for help?" He could not speak for a moment. Then he said, "Some of them." "Did you help them?" He looked at her. He had never lied to a child. He was not going to start now. "Not all of them," he said. She nodded slowly as if that was an answer she had expected. "Did you help my mommy?" she asked. The room had gone completely still. Grip had stopped moving. Paulie had set down his phone. Wrench was looking at the floor. "No, Lily," Hank said. "I did not." She looked at him for a long moment. "Why not?" she asked. He did not have an answer for that. Not one he could give to an 8-year-old, not one he had ever found in 15 years that he could give to himself either. "It was a mistake," he said. "It was a bad mistake, and I have been sorry for it every day since." She nodded. Then she did something that surprised him. She got down off her chair and walked across the room and stood next to him. She did not touch him. She just stood there near his elbow, looking at the wall. "My mommy used to hum," she said. "I do not remember her face except from the picture, but I remember she used to hum. There was a song. Mrs. Pollock heard me humming it once and said it was a song from a long time ago." Hank could not look at her. "It is a song my own mother used to hum," he said. "Your mother and my mother grew up in the same neighborhood. They knew each other a little, a long time ago." Lily considered that. "Is that why she wrote your name on the paper?" she asked. "I think so," he said. "I think she thought if anything ever happened to her that I would help. But you did not." "I did not." "And then she got hurt." "Yes." She nodded again. She was a very small person, and she had eaten one bowl of chili, and she was being asked to absorb a piece of information that grown adults often could not absorb. But she absorbed it. She did not cry. She did not yell. She did not run. She just stood there and took it in, and then she said something Hank Morrow would remember every day for the rest of his life. She said, "Then you should help me now." He looked down at her. "Yes," he said, "I should." The front door opened. Everyone in the room moved at once. Grip stood up. Paulie reached under the table. Carver crossed the room toward the door. But it was just Wrench's nephew dropping off a tool who had not realized a meeting was happening. He apologized and left. The room did not relax afterward. Polly looked at Hank. "Boss," he said, "I think we need to have a conversation." "Yeah," Hank said, "we do." He turned to Lily. "Lily, I am going to ask you to do me a favor. There is a back room here. There is a couch in it. It is comfortable. Will you go and sit there for a little while, and I will come back and get you in a few minutes?" She nodded. "Wrench is going to walk you back." Wrench stood up. He was a big man, 63 years old, with hands like cement blocks. He smiled at Lily, and it was the gentlest thing Hank had seen in years. "Come on, kid," Wrench said. "I will tell you a story while you wait." Lily looked at Hank one more time. Then she took Wrench's enormous hand in her small one and walked back through the door at the rear of the main room. When the door closed behind them, Hank sat down at the table. He told his men in as few words as he could who Clara Bennett had been. He told them about the vote in February of 2017. He told them about the black notebook. He told them that he had cast the deciding vote and that he had been wrong, and that the child who had just walked out of the room was Clara's daughter, and that she had walked 3 days through cold weather with no shoes to find them. When he was done, nobody said anything for a long time. Grip was the first to speak. "Why did we say no?" Hank shook his head. "It seemed complicated. She had been involved with a man in the Northgate crew, Marcus Teal. She had seen him kill someone, and she had agreed to testify. There was federal interest. There were people watching her. The chapter thought it would put us in the middle of something we did not need to be in the middle of." "And you agreed with that," Grip said. "I cast the deciding vote." Grip nodded slowly. He was not a man who showed much, but his jaw was tight. "And now her daughter is here," Polly said, 8 years later. "Yes, with a piece of paper with our address on it." "Yes." Carver, the youngest, spoke for the first time. "How did she even get here? She is 8. She walked from Toledo, most of the way." "Jesus." Torres, who almost never spoke, said one word. "Teal." Hank looked at him. "Teal," Torres said again. "Is he still alive?" "He served time on unrelated charges. He has been out about 14 months. The men looked at each other. "So if he knows she is alive," Polly said. "He knows," Torres said. "He has always known. He has just not been able to find her." Wrench came back into the room. He closed the door behind him. "She is on the couch," he said. "I gave her a blanket. She is reading a magazine." He sat down. Then he said, "Boss, there is something you need to see." He held something out across the table. A phone. A cheap one, small, the kind they call a burner. It looked tiny in Wrench's hand. "It was in the pocket of her dress," Wrench said. "She showed it to me. She wanted me to know about it. She said she took it from a man who was following her at a bus station in Bowling Green." Hank picked up the phone. He turned it over. There were 2 missed calls on the screen, both from the same number. The most recent had come in at 9:14 that evening, less than 2 hours ago. He looked at his men. "They were close," he said. "They were close to her, and they lost her." "And now she is here," Polly said. "And whoever was tracking that phone knows the phone stopped moving." "Yes." Grip stood up. He walked to the window at the front of the clubhouse and looked out at the street. The street was empty, but it was the kind of empty that did not feel empty. "We have a problem," Grip said. Hank looked at the door behind which Lily was sitting on a couch with a blanket and a magazine, and he thought about the photograph of her mother on the wall, and he thought about the word no, and he thought about the way Lily had said, "Then you should help me now," with the same calm, steady attention as her mother had once stood at this same table and said, "Please." "No," he said, "we do not have a problem." He stood up. "We have a debt." Outside the window, on the other side of the street, a car that had been parked with its lights off for the past 9 minutes started its engine and pulled slowly away. Inside the clubhouse, the men of the Iron Saints sat around a table and listened to the man at the head of it tell them quietly what was going to happen next. The wind off the river had teeth. November in Detroit had a way of doing that. And for the first time in 15 years, Hank Morrow was getting ready to do something he should have done a very long time ago. In the back room on a brown couch under a wool blanket, an 8-year-old girl named Lily Bennett held her mother's photograph against her chest, closed her eyes and listened to the low voices of men through the wall, and somewhere in the part of her that still remembered being a baby in a small apartment with a woman who hummed, she let herself feel just a little, the thing she had not allowed herself to feel in a very long time. She let herself feel almost safe. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, the night had only just begun. The back room was small. There was a couch, a side table with a lamp, a window with a curtain pulled across it, and a door that locked from both sides. Wrench had brought her a blanket that was scratchy but warm, and a magazine about motorcycles that she could not really read but liked to look at because of the pictures. Lily sat very still on the couch. She had heard voices through the wall, low and serious. She could not make out the words, but she knew what serious sounded like. She had been hearing serious for as long as she could remember. She thought about her mother. She did not have memories of her mother in the way other children have memories. She had pieces. The smell of vanilla, which she did not know if was real or if she had imagined because Mrs. Pollock used to bake. The humming, which she was sure was real because she could do it herself without thinking. The shape of a face she had only ever seen in one photograph, the same photograph she carried folded against her chest, the same photograph that she now knew hung in a wooden frame in the next room. She thought about the man who had brought her inside. Hank, the others called him. He was tall, and his hands were big, and his eyes were tired in a way that made her think of the older women at the children's home in Toledo, the ones who had been there a long time and seen things they wished they had not seen. He did not look at her the way some men looked at her. He looked at her the way a person looks at another person. He had not helped her mother. She knew this now. She had known it for about 10 minutes. It was a strange thing to know. She had thought about her mother for as long as she could remember thinking about anything, and now there was a man on the other side of a wall who had failed to save her, and she did not know what to do with that. She did not feel angry. She had expected to feel angry. Instead, she felt something else. She felt that he was sorry. She felt that he had not been sorry for one day, but for many days, the way she was sorry for losing the blue ribbon her mother had left her, sorry every time she opened the box and remembered. She wondered if grown-ups could be sorry like that. She had thought maybe they could not. She had thought maybe being grown up meant you stopped being sorry. But he was sorry. She could see it. She heard footsteps in the hallway, then a soft knock on the door. "Lily!" It was Hank's voice. "Can I come in?" "Yes," she said. He opened the door slowly. He had the black notebook in his hand. He came in and sat down on the floor across from the couch so that his head was below hers. She had never had a grown man sit on the floor for her before. It made her feel something she could not name. "I am going to tell you the truth about a few things," he said. "Some of it is going to be hard to hear. Are you ready for that?" She nodded. "Your mother was a very brave woman, Lily. She saw a man do something very bad. She agreed to tell the police about it. Because she agreed to tell the police, some other bad men became very angry with her. She came here to this club, and she asked us to keep her safe. We said no. 3 days later, she was hurt, and she did not come back. I am the man who said no. The decision was mine. I have been wrong about it every single day since." Lily watched his face while he spoke. She watched it carefully. "Why did you say no?" she asked. "I was afraid," Hank said. I told myself it was something else. I told myself it was about risk and about complications, but underneath I was afraid. I was the president of this chapter, and I was afraid of what might happen to the men who follow me. So I told your mother I could not help, and she walked out that door, and 3 days later she was gone. He set the notebook down on the floor between them. This book has the names of every person I should have helped and did not. Your mother's name is on the first page. I want you to know that I have been carrying her name in my pocket for 15 years. I know that does not make any of it better, but I want you to know it. Lily looked at the notebook. She did not pick it up. I am going to help you, Lily, Hank said. I do not know exactly how yet. The men who hurt your mother are still out there. They know you are alive and they are looking for you, but I am going to help you. I will not say no this time, not for any reason. Do you understand? She nodded slowly. I want to tell you one more thing, and then I am going to let you sleep. You did a brave thing by coming here. Your mother believed I would help you, and she was wrong 15 years ago, but she is right tonight. I am going to make her right. Is that all right with you? Lily thought about it. Then she did something that surprised both of them. She got off the couch, walked across the small space between them, and sat down on the floor next to him. She did not touch him. She just sat next to him. The blanket pulled around her shoulders, her small bare feet next to his big boots. My mother wrote your name down, she said. I am going to trust her. Hank Morrow, 58 years old, 11 years as president. A man who had seen more in his life than most men see in 3 lives, sat on the floor of a small back room of a clubhouse on Cass Avenue and put his face in his hands for a moment. He did not cry. He had not cried in a long time, and he was not going to start now in front of an 8-year-old. But he put his face in his hands. When he looked up, Lily was watching him with that steady attention. Her mother's eyes, her mother's patience. All right, he said. All right, Lily, let's get you some sleep. He stood up and lifted her gently to her feet and walked her back to the couch and tucked the scratchy blanket around her shoulders. He left the lamp on low. He picked up the notebook and walked toward the door. Hank, she said. He turned. The man at the bus station, she said. The one whose phone I took. He had a tattoo on his neck. It was a number, 321. Hank stood very still in the doorway. Are you sure about that, Lily? She nodded. Did he see you take the phone? He was sleeping. I was hungry, and I thought maybe he had money in his coat. He did not. He had the phone. What did you do then? I got on the next bus. Where to? Anywhere that was not where he was. The bus came to Detroit. I got off because I had your paper, and I asked people how to get to this street, and they told me, and I walked. Hank stood in the doorway for a long moment. Lily, listen to me. You did the right thing. You did everything right. Go to sleep now. He closed the door. He stood in the hallway with his hand on the doorknob. The number 321 was a tattoo he knew. It belonged to a group of men associated with the Northgate crew, not the inner circle, but close. A man with that tattoo following an 8-year-old girl through Ohio meant they had been searching for her for some time. It meant they had probably gone through every foster placement she had been in. It meant Mrs. Pollock in Toledo, the kindly old woman who had ended up in the hospital, might not have ended up there by accident. It meant this was bigger than Hank had thought. He walked back into the main room. His men were waiting. He told them about the tattoo. He told them about the bus station. He told them about Mrs. Pollock. When he finished, Grip said, How long have they been hunting her? I do not know yet, Hank said, but I am going to find out. He looked at his men, his 5 oldest brothers in this club, and he said the thing he had not said out loud in 15 years. I made the wrong call in 2017. I am not going to make it again. The girl is staying with us. Whatever this costs, whatever we have to give, we give it. Are we agreed? Grip nodded. Paulie nodded. Carver nodded. Torres nodded. Wrench said, "Brother, I have been waiting 15 years for you to say those words." Hank Morrow looked at the photograph on the wall. He looked at the dark eyes of Clara Bennett. "All right," he said. "Let's begin." Outside the clubhouse, the wind off the river kept its teeth. Inside the back room, Lily Bennett slept for the first time in 3 days, without one hand curled around the slip of paper. She had given the paper to Hank. She did not need it anymore. By morning, the city had a different kind of light. Detroit in November woke up gray. The sun, if it came at all, came late and small. Hank Morrow had not slept. He had spent most of the night on a chair in the hallway outside the back room, listening to the sound of an 8-year-old's slow breathing on the other side of the wall and watching the front door of the clubhouse over the top of a coffee cup he had refilled 4 times. At 6 in the morning, he called Diane Whitaker again. She picked up on the first ring. She had not slept either. "I am coming to you," she said. "Do not move. Do not put her in the system. Do not call anyone else. I am bringing a folder." "Diane." "Hank, listen to me. Listen carefully. That child has been missing from the official record for almost 2 years. She does not exist on paper. Somebody erased her. I am going to bring you the file that I have, and I am going to tell you what I know, and then we are going to figure out together what to do, because I am not letting her go back into a system that was supposed to protect her and did the opposite. Is that clear?" "That is clear. I will be there by 8. She hung up. Hank sat with the phone in his hand for a moment. Erased. Somebody had erased a child. He thought about Mrs. Pollock in Toledo and about the man at the bus station with the tattoo on his neck, and he started to understand the size of what had been moving in the background for years while he had been running charity rides and arguing about property in Hamtramck. Lily woke up at 7. Wrench made her oatmeal. She ate it sitting at the long table while the men of the chapter came and went around her, each one of them stopping to nod at her or to say good morning, and she nodded back at each of them with the same serious attention. By the time she finished her bowl, she knew their names: Grip, Paulie, Carver, Torres, and Wrench. She had learned the name of Wrench's wife, who had passed away 2 years ago. She had learned that Torres had a dog named Boots. She had learned that Carver was studying to be an electrician at night. She did not ask any of these things directly. People just told her the way people tell things to a child who is paying attention. Diane arrived at 8 minutes past 8. She was a small woman with gray hair pulled back tight and a long winter coat. She had a manila folder under her arm. Hank met her at the door and brought her inside. Lily looked up from the table. Diane stopped. She looked at Lily for a long moment. Her face did something complicated. "Hello, Lily," she said. "My name is Diane. I work with children sometimes. I am here to help your friend Mr. Morrow figure some things out. Is it all right if I talk with him for a little while?" Lily nodded. "Could you do me a favor, Lily, while we talk? Could you draw me a picture? Anything you want." She slid a small notebook and a pencil across the table. Lily took the pencil. She thought for a moment. Then she began to draw. Diane motioned Hank to the back office. They closed the door. She opened the folder. "This is what I have been able to put together overnight," she said. "It is not complete, but it is enough." Lily Bennett, born May 14, 2017. Mother Clara Bennett. Father listed as unknown. Mother killed February 14, 2017. Lily was 3 months old. "That makes her 8 now," Hank said. "Yes." Placed with her maternal great-aunt, a woman named Ruth Coleman in Toledo. Stayed there until age 6. Then Ruth Coleman died. Listed cause of death, heart attack. There is a note in the file from the medical examiner that he had questions but did not pursue them. All right. After that, Lily went into foster care. 3 placements in 2 years. The last placement was with a woman named Eleanor Pollock. Mrs. Pollock had a stroke 6 weeks ago and is currently in a long-term care facility in Toledo. She is not expected to recover. Hank watched Diane's face. "There is something else," he said. "Yes. What is it?" "When Mrs. Pollock had her stroke, Lily was supposed to be transferred to a new placement. The paperwork was filed. A caseworker named Vincent Holbrook signed off on it. Lily was scheduled to be picked up at the Pollock house and delivered to a temporary group home outside Toledo on October 28th. 3 weeks ago." "Yes. And what happened?" "Lily ran. The pickup happened. The caseworker reported her missing. But here is the part that bothers me, Hank. Vincent Holbrook signed off on Lily's placement with Eleanor Pollock 2 years ago. Vincent Holbrook also signed off on her placement with Ruth Coleman 6 years before that. Vincent Holbrook has been involved with this child's file for her entire life, and Vincent Holbrook has flagged this child's case as confidential, which means almost no one in the system has been able to see her file without going through him." Hank felt something cold move down his spine. "And who is Vincent Holbrook?" "He is a caseworker in our office. He has been with the department for 31 years. He has handled hundreds of cases. He is, as far as anyone has ever known, completely reliable. But this morning I went into the office at 5 and pulled his complete file. He has handled 4 other children whose mothers were connected in one way or another to federal cases involving the Northgate crew. All 4 of those children disappeared from the foster system between the ages of 2 and 7. None of them have ever been found." The room was very quiet. "Diane." "Yes? Are you telling me there is a man in your office who has been making children disappear for the Northgate crew?" "I am telling you that I do not yet know. But I am telling you that if I am right, then this child, this one specific child, is the one who got away. And if she is the one who got away, then they want her back more than I have words for, because she is the only person alive who is a direct link to Clara Bennett, and Clara Bennett is the only ghost they have not been able to bury." Hank sat down slowly in the office chair. "What do I do?" he said. "You keep her here. You do not let her out of this building until I tell you it is safe. I am going to start moving on Holbrook today. I have a friend at the Federal Bureau. I have been waiting for a reason to make this call for 2 years, Hank. You just gave me one. And if Holbrook knows we have her, he almost certainly already knows. The phone she brought with her was being tracked. The trackers know it stopped at this address. The trackers report to Holbrook, who reports to whoever runs the Northgate crew now. Within 12 hours of her arrival, every person in that operation knew where she was. That is why I told you on the phone last night not to move her." "All right. There is one more thing." "What?" Diane reached into her folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. She slid it across the desk. It was a copy of a police report from February of 2017. A neighbor of Clara Bennett's had called the police about a man standing across the street from Clara's apartment building on the night of February 13th. The neighbor had described the man as in his early 20s, well-dressed, watching the building. The police had taken the report and filed it. They had never followed up. The next night, Clara Bennett had been killed. There was no name on the report. The man had never been identified. "I think," Diane said carefully, "that if we ever do identify the man across the street that night, you are going to find out he is someone who is still walking around. And I think Lily might know what he looks like." Hank looked at the police report. Then he looked up. "She was 3 months old." "I know. How would she know?" "I do not know yet. But there is a reason they want her, Hank. There is a reason this child has been being hunted by professionals for years, and it is not just because of who her mother was. It is because of something she might have seen, or something her mother might have told someone in those last days, or something else we do not yet understand. We need to find out what it is, and we need to find out fast." There was a knock on the door. Carver opened it. "Boss," he said, You need to come out here. The kid wants to show you her drawing. Hank and Diane walked out into the main room. Lily had drawn a picture. She had set it carefully in the middle of the table. She was sitting up very straight on her chair looking at it. It was a drawing of a man, not a child stick figure, a real attempt at a face. The proportions were not perfect, but it was clear what she had drawn. A man with a square jaw, short hair, eyes set close together. He was wearing what looked like a coat with a collar turned up. There were marks on the side of his neck that might have been a tattoo. Below the drawing, in the careful handwriting of a child just learning to write, she had printed 3 words. Outside Mom's window. Hank looked at the drawing for a long time. Then he looked at Lily. "Lily," he said, "where did you see this man?" "In a memory," she said. "I have it sometimes when I'm going to sleep. I see his face by a window. The window has rain on it. He is looking at the window from outside, and then I do not see him anymore." "How old were you in the memory?" "I do not know. Little." Diane and Hank looked at each other. "Have you ever drawn him before?" Diane asked gently. "Once, for Mrs. Pollock. She told me to throw it away." The room was silent. "Did Mrs. Pollock seem afraid when you showed it to her?" Hank asked. "Yes," Lily said. "She seemed afraid. She told me not to draw him again. She told me he was a bad dream. She said that bad dreams could come true if you drew them too many times." Diane took a slow breath. "Lily," she said, "would it be all right if Mr. Morrow and I kept your drawing for a little while? We will give it back, but we would like to look at it more carefully." "Yes," Lily said. She slid the drawing across the table. Diane picked it up. Her hands, Hank noticed, were trembling slightly. "I have to go," she said. "I am going to take this with me. I am going to call my friend at the bureau. Hank, I want you to keep her here. I will be in touch by the end of the day." She left. The men of the chapter looked at Hank. "What was that?" Polly said quietly. "That," Hank said, "was a witness." He walked over to the table and sat down across from Lily. "You are very brave, Lily." "I am not brave, I just remember things." "Remembering things is a kind of brave." She thought about that. "My mommy remembered things too," she said. "Mrs. Pollock told me that one time. She said my mommy remembered something she should not have remembered, and that is why she had to go away." "Yes," Hank said, "that is true. And now I remember something I should not remember." "Yes." Lily put her hands flat on the table. "Will I have to go away too?" Hank looked at her across the table. He looked at her steady, dark eyes. He looked at her mother's face on the wall behind her. "No, Lily," he said, "you will not have to go away. I am going to make sure of it." The day moved slowly. Diane did not call back at noon, and she did not call back at 2, and Hank started to feel the slow tightening of a man waiting on a phone call that could change everything. He kept his men close. He had Wrench drive his pickup around the block every hour, checking the cars on the street. He had Polly at the front window. He had Grip at the back door. At 3:20 in the afternoon, Wrench came back from his drive and reported that there was a black sedan parked 2 blocks east of the clubhouse on Selden that had not been there at noon. He could not see who was in it. At 4, the sedan was still there. At 4:30, a different car, a gray utility vehicle, pulled up behind the sedan. At 5, both cars left at the same time in opposite directions. Then at 5:15, Wrench's phone rang. It was his nephew Travis, who had stopped by the night before. Travis was a mechanic at a shop in Hamtramck. Wrench listened for 30 seconds and then walked over to Hank without saying anything and held out the phone. "Boss?" Hank took it. "Travis." "Mr. Morrow, Uncle Eddie told me to call you if anything weird happened today." "Yes, something weird happened." "Tell me." "A guy came by the shop, said he was looking for his cousin, showed me a picture of an old guy he said was missing. The picture was of my uncle, of Wrench. He said his uncle had been missing for 2 days and asked if anyone at the shop had seen him." "Did you recognize the man?" "No, but there was another guy in the car outside watching the shop. I went and looked through the window when they left. The other guy had a tattoo on his neck. A number. I could not see exactly, but it was a number. Hank closed his eyes. 321. Yeah, that was it. How did you know? Travis, listen to me. Get out of the shop. Go home a different way than usual. Stay there. Lock the door. I will call you tomorrow. Mr. Morrow. Go home, Travis. He hung up. He turned to Wrench. They are mapping the chapter, he said. They are tracing every one of us, looking for somebody soft, somebody they can lean on, somebody whose family they can find. Wrench did not say anything. His jaw was set. Boss, Grip said from the back door, we just lost the lights on the east side of the building. The room got very still. Power outage, Paulie said. Just the east side. The west side is fine. That is not a power outage. Hank stood up. He walked across the room and looked into the back room. Lily was on the couch reading the motorcycle magazine. She looked up. Lily, he said quietly, we are going to play a small game. I am going to ask you to come into the main room with me and sit between Wrench and Paulie. You are not going to be scared. Nothing is wrong, but we are going to be in the main room for a little while. She climbed down off the couch. She brought the magazine with her. He walked her into the main room. The lights on the east side of the building flickered. Then they came back on. The lights on the west side went out. Then they came back on too. The lights on the entire ground floor of the building flickered together once. Then a voice came through the speakers of the small radio Wrench kept on the bar. The radio had been turned off. The voice said calmly, very clearly, Mr. Morrow, please send out the child. We are not interested in anyone else. The child only. You have 1 hour. The radio clicked off. The room did not move. Lily had stopped walking. She was holding Wrench's hand. She was looking at the radio. Hank stood completely still for a moment. Then he said, Carver, lock the front door. Torres, check the back. Paulie, cellular still works. Paulie checked his phone. Yes. Call Diane, now. Paulie dialed. He held the phone to his ear. He waited. He waited some more. Voicemail, he said. Hank looked at Wrench. Get the long guns out of the back, he said. All of them, quietly. Wrench nodded. Hank turned and crouched down in front of Lily. I want you to listen to me very carefully, he said. The man on the radio is one of the bad men. He is trying to scare us, and he is trying to scare you. He is not going to come in here. We are going to handle this. But I need you to be very quiet for the next hour, and I need you to do exactly what I tell you to do. Can you do that? She nodded. You are going to go with Wrench and Paulie into the back office. You will sit on the floor behind the desk. You will not come out unless I come and get you myself. Do you understand? Yes. Good girl. She did not move. Hank. Yes. He sounded like the man from the bus station. Hank looked at her. The one whose phone I took. He has the same voice. All right, Lily, thank you. Wrench took her hand. Paulie followed. They walked to the back office and closed the door. Hank stood up. He looked at Grip and Carver and Torres. They are not coming through the front, he said. They want her quietly. They want everyone to think she is just gone. They will try the back or the roof or the side entrance. Carver, you take the side. Torres, you take the roof access. Grip, you stay with me at the back. We do not start anything. But if they come in, they do not leave. He thought for a moment. And call Diane again every 5 minutes. The men moved. For the next 40 minutes, the clubhouse on Cass Avenue was the quietest building in Detroit. The men of the Iron Saints did not speak. They did not move except to take their positions. The lights stayed on. The radio stayed silent. Outside, the gray afternoon began to slide toward evening. At 15 minutes before the hour was up, Paulie's phone rang. It was Diane. She was breathing hard. Hank, listen. Listen carefully. Vincent Holbrook is dead. He was found 2 hours ago in his car in a parking garage downtown. Single gunshot. They are calling it a suicide, but it is not a suicide. I have been with the Bureau for the last 4 hours. We were getting ready to bring him in. Someone got to him first. Hank closed his eyes. There is more Hank. The Bureau has been watching the Northgate crew for 3 years. They have a federal indictment ready. They have been waiting for one more piece of evidence to bring it. They believe, and I now believe, that the piece of evidence they have been waiting for is Lily Bennett. They believe she is a material witness. They want to talk to her tomorrow under proper protection. There is a safe house. There is a team in place. We can have her under federal protection by 10 in the morning. We just have to keep her safe tonight. They are here, Diane. Who is? The Northgate crew. They are outside the clubhouse. They cut the power to half the building 20 minutes ago. They came on our radio and told me to send her out. I have 1 hour. I have 45 minutes left. There was a long pause. Hank, you need to get out of there. They will follow us. You need to call the police. The police did not save her mother, Diane. This time it will be different. I am calling now. I am going to put 6 unmarked cars on your street in the next 10 minutes. Hold on. Just hold on. All right. She hung up. Hank turned to Grip. Help is coming. We hold. The 45 minutes turned into 30. The 30 turned into 20. At 10 minutes before the hour, Hank heard a sound he had been waiting for. A car engine on Cass Avenue. Then another. Then a third. Unmarked. No sirens. Just engines. Then faintly in the distance, sirens. Real ones. Then from the radio that had been silent for an hour, a single click. A voice. The same voice. Mr. Morrow, we will speak again. Click. Hank waited. The first knock came on the front door. He knew that knock. He had heard it before. He walked to the door. He opened it. 2 men in suits. One held up a badge. Mr. Morrow, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need you to step aside, please. Hank stepped aside. The agents came in. 4 of them. They moved through the building, checking corners and entrances. They were professional. They were polite. One of them said, "We have units on the surrounding streets. The building is secure." Hank walked back to the office. He knocked. Wrench. It is me. The door opened. Lily was sitting on the floor behind the desk, very small, with her arms around her knees. She looked up. Is it over? She asked. This part is over, yes. Are we safe? For tonight, yes. She did not stand up. She just sat there for a moment. Then she said, Hank. Yes. My mommy waited a long time for someone to come. He could not answer. You came, she said. He crouched down. He held out his hand. She took it. They walked out of the office together. In the main room, an agent stood waiting. He had a kind face. He nodded at Lily. Hello, Lily. My name is Special Agent Tom Sullivan. I am going to keep you safe tonight. Tomorrow morning I would like to ask you some questions. Are you all right with that? Lily looked at Hank. Will you come with me? She asked him. Hank looked at the agent. The agent nodded slightly. Yes, Hank said, I will come with you. That night, the Iron Saints clubhouse on Cass Avenue stood empty for the first time in 11 years. The men of the chapter had been moved temporarily to a hotel under federal protection. Hank Morrow sat on a couch in a small safe house in a part of Detroit he had never been to before, and on the couch next to him an 8-year-old girl slept under a clean white blanket with her hand resting on his arm, and outside somewhere in the city, Marcus Teal and Damon Cole and the rest of the Northgate crew were learning hour by hour that the child they had been hunting for years had moved beyond their reach. But Marcus Teal had not built his life on letting things move beyond his reach. In a basement office on the east side of the city, he was at that exact moment making a phone call to a man whose name had not appeared in any file. Diane Whitaker had pulled a man who had been quietly making sure for 31 years that certain children disappeared and certain witnesses never testified and certain crimes stayed unsolved. The man on the other end of the line listened to Teal in silence. Then he said only one sentence. Bring her to me, and the phone went dead. The safe house was a small two-story brick home on a quiet street in Grosse Pointe Park. Federal agents had set up in the kitchen and the front room. There was a bedroom upstairs where Lily was supposed to sleep, but for the first night, she had asked to stay on the couch in the living room near Hank. The agents had agreed. Special Agent Tom Sullivan was 46 years old. He had worked organized crime in Detroit for 19 years. He had been hunting the Northgate crew for the last 7 of those 19 years. When Diane Whitaker had called him at 3:30 the previous afternoon and said the words, "Clara Bennett's daughter," he had stood up from his desk so fast that he knocked over his coffee. He sat across from Hank at the kitchen table at 6 in the morning. The agents had made coffee. It was bad. They drank it anyway. "I want to be straight with you," Sullivan said. "We have been waiting for this child for 8 years. We did not know she existed for the first 3 years. We learned about her in 2020 from a confidential informant who is now also dead. Since then, we have been trying to find her in the system, and the system has been pushing back. We knew there was somebody in the foster care office in Toledo who was keeping her file dark. We did not know it was Vincent Holbrook. We did not know there were 3 other caseworkers across 2 states involved. We are now going to find all of them." "You think she is a witness?" "I think she is more than a witness. I think she is the only person who can directly identify Marcus Teal as the man who killed Clara Bennett." "She was 3 months old, Agent Sullivan." "I know, and that is why we have a problem, because I am not going to put a 3-month-old's memory in front of a jury and expect a conviction. So I need something else from her or from the evidence around her that will hold up. The drawing is a start, but we need more." Hank looked at his coffee. "There is a box," he said. Sullivan raised his eyebrows. "Lily told me last night, before she fell asleep. She said there is a box that belonged to her mother. Mrs. Pollock kept it in a closet. Lily said she took some things out of the box when she ran the photograph and the slip of paper, but most of it was too heavy to carry, and she had to leave it behind." "What is in the box?" "She does not know. She said her mother's handwriting is in some of it. She said there is a small recorder. She has never been allowed to listen to it." Sullivan stood up. "I am going to Toledo," he said, "right now." "Take Wrench with you," Hank said. "He can drive. He can also identify anyone associated with Northgate from a distance." "All right." Sullivan left. Hank walked into the living room. Lily was sitting up on the couch with the blanket around her shoulders. She had been awake for some time watching the snow that had started to fall outside the front window. "Good morning, Lily." "Good morning, Hank." "Agent Sullivan is going to Toledo to find your mother's box. Will that be all right?" She nodded. "Lily, there is something I have to ask you about the box, about what is in it. Did Mrs. Pollock ever tell you what she thought was in the recorder?" "She said she thought my mommy made a tape for me, for when I was older. She said she had never listened to it because it was not hers to listen to." "All right." "Hank." "Yes." "Can I see my mother's picture again? The one on the wall in your building?" He thought about it. "Not today," he said. "Maybe in a few days, when things are quieter." "Okay." He sat down on the couch next to her. She leaned against his arm. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait. Agent Sullivan will come back. We will talk to him about what your mother left for you. We will figure out what to do next." "Will I have to go back into the system?" He looked at her. "No," he said. "You will not. I do not yet know exactly what comes after this, Lily. There are things called paperwork, and there are people who need to sign things, but you are not going back into the system. I promised you that, and I am going to keep that promise." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Hank, can I ask you something else?" "Yes." "If I had not come to your building, if I had stayed in Toledo, would you have ever come looking for me?" He could not answer that for a long time. When he finally did, he said, "I should have. For 15 years I should have. And I did not. I am not going to lie to you, Lily. I did not look, and I should have. So I am very glad you came. I am very glad you came to find me. I am sorry I did not come to find you first." She nodded. "That is a true answer," she said. "I can tell when people give true answers." "You are very smart, Lily." "My mommy was smart too." Yes, she was. They sat together for a long time watching the snow. Sullivan and Wrench came back from Toledo at 6 in the evening. They brought a cardboard box. It was not large. It was the size of a shoebox taped shut. Mrs. Pollock had hidden it inside a hollowed-out copy of a Bible in the back of her bedroom closet. The agents had to cut the Bible open to get to it. The Bible had still been on Mrs. Pollock's nightstand after she had been moved to the long-term care facility. Nobody had thought to look at it. They opened the box on the kitchen table. Hank watched. Sullivan had given Lily the option to be present, and Lily had said yes. Inside the box, there was a small audio recorder, old, the kind with a cassette tape inside. There were 3 letters in envelopes, all addressed in Clara Bennett's handwriting to "My daughter when she is older." There were several photographs. There were 3 small notebooks, and there was a sealed manila envelope with the words, "To whoever finds this," written on the front. Sullivan opened the manila envelope first. Inside was a handwritten document, 6 pages, dated February 10th, 2017, 4 days before Clara Bennett's death. It was a sworn statement written and signed describing in detail the murder Clara had witnessed in November of 2016. It named Marcus Teal. It named 2 other men. It described the location, the time, the victim, the weapon. It explained how Clara had come to witness the murder. It explained that she had been pregnant at the time. It explained that she had decided to write the statement down and have it notarized because she was afraid she would not live long enough to testify in person. The bottom of the last page had a notary seal. The notary had been a woman named Bertha Hill. Hank did not know her. Sullivan wrote down her name with a hand that was shaking very slightly. "This is everything," Sullivan said quietly. "This is everything we needed for 8 years." Hank looked at Lily. She was watching Sullivan's face. "Is that a good thing?" she asked. "Yes, Lily," Sullivan said. "It is a very good thing." He opened the cassette tape next. They listened to it in the kitchen, just Hank and Lily and Sullivan and Wrench, who had not left. Clara Bennett's voice came out of the small speaker, soft, calm, a little tired but clear. "Lily, this is your mother. If you are listening to this, you are old enough to understand things, and I am not there. I am sorry. I tried to be there. I want you to know 2 things. The first is that I love you more than anything in this world, and everything I have done in the last 6 months I have done, because I wanted you to be able to grow up safe and happy. The second is that I made a friend a long time ago, a man named Hank Morrow. He grew up on the same street I grew up on. He used to be kind to me. I do not know if he can help me now. I am going to ask him today. If he cannot, you will never hear this. If he can, and you are listening to this someday, then he kept his promise, and I want you to know that he is a good man, and I am grateful, and you are safe, and I love you. I love you, Lily. I will love you for always. Be brave, my baby girl. Be brave." The tape ended. Nobody moved. Lily had not made a sound during the recording. She had sat very still on her chair. Now slowly she put both of her hands on the table. She looked at them. Then she looked up at Hank. "She thought you would help," she said. "She did. She was wrong 15 years ago." "Yes, but she was right tonight." Hank could not answer. Lily got down off her chair. She walked around the kitchen table. She came over to Hank and put both of her small hands on his arm. "You kept the promise," she said. "It was late, but you kept it." Hank Morrow put his hand on top of her two small hands. He did not speak. He did not need to. Agent Sullivan wiped his eye with the back of his wrist. Then he said very quietly, "I need to make some phone calls." That night, federal agents moved on the homes of every senior member of the Northgate crew. 27 arrests were made between midnight and 4 in the morning. Marcus Teal was found in a basement office on the east side of the city. He did not resist. He simply stood up from his chair, put his hands on his head, and said only one sentence to the agents who arrested him. "I knew that little girl would find someone someday." Damon Cole turned himself in at 6 in the morning. He brought his lawyer. He had decided to cooperate. By noon the next day, the case that had collapsed in 2017 had been reopened with new evidence, new witnesses, and a notarized sworn statement from the victim herself. The United States Attorney's Office filed a superseding indictment within 72 hours. Marcus Teal was charged with the murder of Clara Bennett, the murder of Ruth Coleman, and 7 other counts, including conspiracy witness tampering and racketeering. Vincent Holbrook, whose death had been ruled a homicide after a second autopsy, became the subject of a posthumous investigation that uncovered 11 other children whose disappearances from the foster system over 26 years had not been accidental. 3 of those children were still alive. They were found within the next 4 months. Hank Morrow attended the press conference. He stood at the back of the room and did not say a word. When Diane Whitaker stepped up to the microphone to give her statement on behalf of the department, she found his eye in the back of the room and gave him a single nod, and he gave her a single nod back, and that was the conversation they had. After the arrests, after the indictment, after the slow unwinding of the case, what came next was paperwork. The guardianship process was not fast. It was not designed to be fast. There were home visits. There were interviews, there were forms, there were court dates. There was a moment in week 6 when a judge asked Hank whether he understood that taking on the care of a child at the age of 58 was not the same as taking on the care of a child at the age of 30, and whether he had made provision for what would happen to Lily if something happened to him and Hank, who had not considered this, sat in the judge's office for a long, quiet minute before saying that he would have an answer to that question within the week, and the judge nodded and gave him the week. Hank went back to the clubhouse. He called a meeting. He told his men what the judge had asked. He told them he did not have an answer. Wrench, who had been the closest thing Hank had to a brother for 31 years, said, "I am 63. I am not the answer." Grip, who was 52, said, "I would do it. I would do it tomorrow, but I do not think a judge would give her to me." Polly was quiet. Then Polly's wife, Margaret, who had come to the meeting with him because she had stopped letting Polly come to anything alone after his last heart scare, said, "I am 55. I am a registered nurse. I have raised 3 children. I am healthy. Polly and I have been married for 30 years. We have a guest room. If anything happens to Hank, Polly and I will take her." The room went quiet. Polly looked at his wife. "Margaret," he said. "I know," she said. "I know what I am offering. I know what it means. I have thought about it. I have been thinking about it for a month. That child belongs to all of us now. If Hank cannot be there, we will be." Hank Morrow looked at Margaret Voss. He had known her for 30 years. He had been at her wedding. He had been at the christening of her children. He had sat at her kitchen table on many Sunday afternoons. "Margaret," he said, "thank you." "Do not thank me," she said. "Just tell the judge." He told the judge. The judge approved the arrangement. In the meantime, Lily had been moved out of the safe house and into Hank's home. It was a small house on the west side of Detroit, 3 bedrooms, a yard, a porch that needed paint. Hank had lived in it alone for 26 years. He had not changed anything in it in any of those 26 years. Margaret Voss came over the first week and walked through the house and asked Hank gently if he was prepared for the experience of having a child live in it. Hank said he was not. Margaret made a list: curtains for the second bedroom, a reading lamp, a small desk, a rug that was not the color of dust, books appropriate for an 8-year-old, a new set of sheets, a small dresser that Margaret already had in her basement that Lily could have. Lily moved into the second bedroom on a Tuesday. She did not have many things, just the things from the box which were now in federal evidence, and a few clothes that Margaret had bought her, and the photograph of her mother that Hank had taken down from the wall in the clubhouse and given to her in a new wooden frame. She set the photograph on the small desk. She stood in the middle of the room for a moment. Then she said, "I have never had a room before." Hank, who was standing in the doorway, said, "It is yours." "Just mine, just yours." She walked over to the bed and sat on the edge of it. She bounced slightly. The bed had clean white sheets and a quilt that Margaret had made for her own daughter 20 years ago, and that her daughter had returned the previous month after deciding it was too small for her own children's beds. Hank, "Yes, I think I will be all right here. I think you will too." He closed the door softly and walked down the hall and sat on the edge of his own bed and put his face in his hands and stayed that way for a long time. The first weeks were not easy. They were not hard either. They were just full of small things. Lily had not been in a stable school for 2 years. Hank enrolled her in the local elementary school. He went to the parent meeting. He was the largest person in the room and the only one wearing leather, but he sat in a child-sized chair and listened to the teacher describe the curriculum and signed every form he was given. Lily made one friend in the first week, a small, quiet girl named Sophie, whose parents owned the diner across the street from the school. Lily started spending Saturday mornings at the diner with Sophie, drawing on paper placemats with crayons. She started humming in the kitchen sometimes, the song from before, the one her mother had hummed. Hank found himself stopping whatever he was doing whenever he heard it. Sometimes he hummed it back. The trial began in March. It would last 6 weeks. Lily would not have to testify. The notarized statement and the audio recording had been ruled admissible. Hank attended every day. He sat in the back of the courtroom and watched Marcus Teal sit at the defense table and look smaller and grayer than he had looked in the photographs Diane had pulled. Damon Cole testified for 3 days. He cried twice. He named 11 other people. Marcus Teal was convicted on all counts. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The day of the sentencing, Hank came home from the courthouse and sat in his living room with Lily, who had stayed home from school. He told her that the man who had hurt her mother was going to prison forever and was never coming out. He told her that she did not have to think about him again unless she wanted to. Lily listened. Then she said, "Hank, yes, I do not think I will forget him, but I do not think I will be afraid of him anymore." "That sounds about right. I think I will be afraid of other things sometimes, but not him." "That is all right. That is allowed." "Hank." "Yes. Are you afraid of things?" He thought about it. "I used to be afraid of doing the wrong thing," he said. "I am not afraid of that anymore, not in the same way." "What are you afraid of now?" "Of not doing right by you." She thought about that. "I do not think you have to be afraid of that," she said. "Why not?" "Because you are already doing it." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood up and went to the kitchen and made her a sandwich because making someone a sandwich was the only thing he could think to do. The guardianship was finalized on a Thursday in early June. Hank came home from the courthouse with a manila envelope in his hand and signed papers inside. Lily had stayed home with Margaret Voss, who had come over to wait with her. Hank walked into the kitchen. Margaret looked up from the table. Lily looked up from her drawing. "It is done," he said. "It is official." Margaret stood up. "I will leave you two alone," she said. She came over and put her hand on the side of Lily's face for a moment. Then she let herself out the front door. Hank sat down at the table across from Lily. "You are mine," he said. "Legally, officially, for as long as you need." Lily set down her crayon. "And you are mine," she said. "Yes, forever, for as long as I am here. And after that, Margaret and Polly will be here. And after that, the saints will be here. And the school will be here. And you will not be alone again. Not ever." She climbed down off her chair. She walked around the table. She climbed into his lap. She had never done that before. She sat with her head against his chest. He could feel her breathing. He could feel her small heart beating. He put his arms around her. "Hank, yes, I love you. I love you too, Lily." That weekend, the Saints had a barbecue at the clubhouse. It was the first one of the year. They had cleaned up the lot behind the building. Margaret Voss organized the food. Sophie and her parents came. So did Travis Wrench's nephew. So did half the families of the Saints. Lily ran in the yard for the first time in her life. Really ran. With other children. She came back to the picnic table with grass stains on her knees and a piece of watermelon in her hand, and she looked completely, entirely 8 years old. Inside the clubhouse, Torres had been working on something. He brought it out late in the afternoon when the light was starting to soften, and the men were sitting around with paper plates. He carried it across the lot to the back door, walked through the main room, and set it carefully on the bar. Then he motioned for Hank. Hank came in. Lily, who had been watching everything, came in after him. On the bar was a wooden frame. Inside the frame was a photograph. It was a photograph someone had taken at the picnic an hour earlier. Lily laughing at something off camera mid-run, her hair flying behind her, her face lit up. Hank looked at it for a long time. "I thought," Torres said quietly, "that it was time." Hank nodded. He picked up the frame. He walked over to the memorial wall, the wall where for 15 years 9 photographs had hung, the wall where on the far left the photograph of Clara Bennett had hung for 15 years exactly. But Clara's photograph was no longer on the wall. Hank had moved it. He had brought it home to Lily. There was an empty space where it had been. He took a small nail from a jar Torres had set on the bar. He took the small hammer that Torres had left next to the jar. He tapped the nail into the empty space. He hung the photograph of Lily. He stood back. He looked at it. A single photograph on a wall that had only held photographs of the lost of a child who had not been lost, of a child who had been found. Lily stood next to him. "Hank, yes, the wall is different now. Yes, the wall is for people we keep," she said. "Yes, Lily, it is." She reached up and took his hand. The Saints were starting to come in from the yard. They saw the photograph on the wall. They went quiet one by one. Then Wrench, who had been watching from the doorway, started to clap, slowly. Then Grip joined in. Then Polly. Then Carver. Then Torres. Then everyone in the yard who could see through the door. Lily, who had never been clapped for in her life, hid her face for a moment against Hank's leg. Then she peeked out. Then she smiled. Outside, the light was turning gold. The city was warm for the first time in months. Detroit in early June had its own particular kind of grace, the kind that came after the long winter, the kind that felt earned. Hank Morrow stood in the clubhouse on Cass Avenue with an 8-year-old girl holding his hand and a photograph of her on the wall where her mother had once been, and he understood finally what he had been trying to understand for 15 years. Some debts you cannot pay back. You can only pay them forward. He had not been able to save Clara Bennett. He had been able to save her daughter. He had been able to give her daughter a place to stand. He had been able to be there when she needed someone, even if it was 15 years too late. even if it had cost him every night of sleep he had lost between then and now. He looked down at Lily. "Come on, kid," he said. "Let's go eat." She did not let go of his hand. They walked back out into the yard together, and somewhere in the back of the photograph on the wall, in a face that had been gone for 15 years, a young woman with dark eyes and a serious mouth would have if she could have smiled. Outside, the saints made room at the picnic table. Margaret Voss handed Lily a plate. Sophie waved her over. Wrench stood up and gave her his chair. The wind off the river had no teeth that night. It was just a wind soft and warm, and carrying the small ordinary sounds of a small ordinary evening, and inside the clubhouse on the wall where the lost had hung for 15 years, the first photograph of someone who had been kept now hung in the place where someone who had been lost had once been. And that was the change that mattered, and that was the change that had been worth everything it had cost. Lily Bennett, 8 years old, ate her dinner with both elbows on the picnic table, listened to a story Wrench was telling about a motorcycle he had owned in 1979, laughed in the right places, and at one point looked up across the table at Hank Morrow and held his eye for just a moment, and the moment said everything that needed saying, and they went back to their food, and the evening continued. And somewhere in the small house on the west side of Detroit, in a second bedroom that was now hers, a small framed photograph of a woman with dark eyes sat on a small desk under a reading lamp, and the lamp was off, but the photograph was there, and it would be there tomorrow, and the day after that, and all the days after that, for as long as there was a desk for it to sit on. The wall in the clubhouse on Cass Avenue had room for more photographs. It was going to need them.